more Bloomberg intelligence from that burgeoning technology hub known as Chicago, Illinois. That's why we placed him out there. Appreciate it, Anurag. Let's get back to these markets here. Kind of red and green on the screen. Not a lot of movement here. Feels like the last week of August, I guess. Shayna Sissel does this stuff for a living. She is the president and CIO of Banrion Capital Management out there in Chicago. Shayna, what are the conversations you're having with your clients these days about alternatives? How do they figure into a modern day portfolio, stocks, bonds? How do you want to have alternatives play there?
Alts is what we do at Banrion, so it's what we have most of our conversations about. And right now, the focus has been on finding ways to add diversifying alternatives, things like managed futures, global macro, hedged equity, arbitrage strategies, maybe a little bit of private credit, and then the debate on where that really belongs. Does it belong in your alternative sleeve or does it belong in your fixed income sleeve? I'm a big believer that it belongs in your fixed income sleeve. So overall, it's really just been about where does it fit in, and overall, most people understand that alts should be in their portfolio. The debate really comes from like where it fits. Is it part of equity and fixed income, like with private credit and private equity? Is it a diversifier? And the majority of the focus today, because of the volatility in the market and the idea that the economy of that, adding the diversifying alternatives to kind of mitigate the volatility in client portfolios.
Shayna, there have been several new products in the ETF space. I'm wondering if you can just highlight some trends for us, and what do you like there?
So the new stuff in the ETF space, I'm not the biggest fan of. We're seeing a lot of buffer ETFs, especially in the crypto space.
자, 링크 다시 한번 올려드렸습니다. 자,
Feel like if you're
십차진이고요.
going to invest in
이어서
crypto, the value add
정리하도록
there is
하겠습니다.
the volatility that they bring to the table, and the buffer ETFs remove all of the diversification benefits of crypto, in my opinion. We're seeing a lot of partnering, right? So you saw the iShares Bridgewater product, the Apollo State Street product, because it's becoming apparent from the alternative asset manager side that they should be in this space, but it's not their area of expertise. So they're pairing with big firms like iShares and Spider to go and bring product to market to the broader retail space. So those are the two biggest trends I'm seeing. I'm not loving a lot of the new product that's coming to market. The product that I tend to like is the product
자,
that gets the least amount of
매수
attention.
진입사인 되도록
It shows
하겠습니다.
that
자,
their assets
매수
under
5개야.
management. It's the stuff that actually
진입사인입니다. 자,
is
매수 5개
implemented
알립니다.
unlike strategies.
진입가
and macro type
54.6입니다.
strategies that are not
24.25.
easy to
매수
market and
진입니다.
package. And those are things like CBLS, which is an active long-short equity fund. Things like BTAL, which is equity market neutral. And then you have some of the new product coming out by Unlimited Funds that is really interesting, that kind of plays on Bob Elliott's backdrop and background, having worked in the hedge fund world. And those are the products I really like, but they don't get the most attention because they're not sexy and they don't have really sexy marketing teams.
Private equity, I think what I've noticed over the last 20, 25 years is
자, 급하게 진입하느라 1계약 진입이었습니다. 자, 매수 1계약. 진입가 54.6입니다.
Particularly over the last 6, 7, 8 years. How do you expect that to play out here? I've heard Jamie Dimon and some other big Wall Street bankers say that they believe activity is going to pick up, IPOs, exits. How do you think about that?
현재
One of the
진입권
latest trends in private equity,
빠르게
they're
실종
calling
후에
continuation
재진입사인
funds,
되도록
which I
하겠습니다.
think is the funniest thing ever. But it's essentially a private equity fund that raises capital, invests and deploys that capital into businesses, but doesn't have a clear opportunity to exit the strategy after 5 to 10 years. So they sell it to another private equity fund, and it goes into a new vintage. And that's how they get their exit. And that's kind of how private equity has been playing the waiting game in an IPO market that hasn't been as active as it has been in the past, and things that are coming to market are much more mature. So, just doing these continuation funds is how private equity has been dealing with the lack of exit opportunities that we have today.
Shayna, what's the number one alt investment most folks should have in their portfolio?
Oh God, that's a great question. I don't think you can just have one. I think it's like fixed income and equities, where you have to think about how to build the building blocks for a diversified portfolio. But if you wanted to think about maybe balanced funds would be the equivalent in the fixed income equity
자,
world.
현재
I think
진입권 여기서
in
수익
the
청산 사인되도록 하겠습니다.
alternative
자,
world, you gotta look at multi-strat.
매수
Same
1계약
idea.
수익
It's
청산
just
사인드립니다.
multiple types of alternative investments in a single strategy.
수익
So
청산
balanced funds is the
사인드립니다.
answer in the traditional space. Multi-strat's the answer in the alternative space. And that would be a fully diversified alternative sleeve.
30 seconds left. Shayna, real estate. How do you
자,
guys
타이밍이 늦어서 조금 더 지켜보고
So in the alt space, it's private real estate,
다시
and
재사인드리도록
that continues
하겠습니다.
to be an area that there's a lot of interest. That's where we're seeing the most interest today, and a lot of our partners are in that space. They're finding really interesting opportunities where they're taking advantage of distressed asset managers who need to sell properties at lower rates. So that's easily the most popular area, and it's largely because there's this distress that's going on, especially in commercial.
Yep.
But also they're very strong income producers, and people are looking for alternative ways to generate income in portfolios.
Shayna, always interesting chatting with you. Shayna Sissel, President and CEO of Banrion Capital Management out there in Chicago. Red and green still on the screen here. We'll keep an eye on that. Coming up, Jennifer Reed, she's Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Litigation Antitrust Analyst. We're going to talk to her about a M&A trade that was announced a week or two ago in the broadcast television space. Tegna merging with another TV broadcaster. Are the regulators
자,
going to let
다시 한번
that
수익 청산 사인되도록 하겠습니다. 수익 청산입니다.
주문 청산이 완료되었습니다.
자, 이어서 11차 진입 비유 대기하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 바로 진입 사인 되도록 하겠습니다. 자, 매도 진입하도록 하겠습니다. 5개야 시간가 매도하도록 하겠습니다.
확인
진입가
바랍니다.
59.00입니다. 자, 매도 진입입니다. 매도 5개야 11차 매도 5개야 진입입니다. 진입가 23559.00입니다.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Well, it's 10:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We've got NASDAQ higher. The Dow, the S&P, they are both in the red. A rally that puts stocks on the brink of record sputtering this morning. Bond yields are rising as euphoria over Fed Chair Jay Powell's remarks last Friday. Talk about Fed rate cuts are easing ahead of a key inflation reading this week. Here's where we stand. The S&P 500 index down 12 now. That is a drop of 0.2%. We got the S&P at 64.54. The Dow is down 210, a decline of 0.5%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up by 14.
자, 여기서 끊어가도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 후에 재진입하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 사인 드립니다.
The 10-year at 4.28%. With the 2-year, 3.73%. Gold up $1 the ounce, 33.73, up less than 0.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.6%.
주문 청산이 완료되었습니다.
And Bitcoin right now at 11,000.
자, 11차 진입뷰 대기하도록 하겠습니다.
By 0.7%. Thoma Bravo has agreed to buy Verint Systems for $1.23 billion in cash as the private equity firm builds out its software portfolio. Right now, we are looking at Verint shares down by 1.2%. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, we want to dive into a broadcasting deal that was announced not long ago. Nexstar buying its rival Tegna. It's a $6.2 billion cash transaction. Works out to about $22 a share. I think that was about a 30% premium.
자, 다시 한번 매도 진입 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 매도 진입 사인 드립니다. 지니까 54.7입니다.
Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Litigation Analyst to break it all down for us. So Jen, once upon a time, there were rules about how many stations one company could own.
자,
Will
매도
this
5개
FCC
아닙니다.
approve this deal?
지니까
I think in the
54.75.
end, yes, because the timing was right. You know, this isn't a deal I think that these companies could have gotten through a few years ago during the Biden administration.
Absolutely.
But both
천천히
of the
목표
rules that the
수익금까지
FCC has that
대응해
would get in the
나가도록
way are in the
하겠습니다.
process of being changed as we speak. And Republican commissioners have for a long time wanted to change these rules. So the first one is the 39% ownership cap. You know, that one company can't own or operate TV stations that reach more than 39% of U.S. households. These companies say they'll reach 80%. So it's just clear on its face that there's a problem there. But the FCC is in a rulemaking process. They'll probably have this rule, get rid of it, vacate it, we think by the end of the year. My colleague Matt Chettenhelm is an expert on the FCC, and we've talked about this quite a bit. That's probably going to clear out of their way. There could be litigation, of course, but we do think the rule will move out of the way. The other issue is owning more than one of what's called the big four broadcast stations, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox. That rule would also get in the way here, probably in a number of local areas, called designated market areas by Nielsen. That rule has also been vacated by the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. It will also probably be in litigation, but it seems like the road is clearing for the FCC there.
It's a whole new world.
Yes, it's a whole new world. But we have Department of Justice also. So we can't forget that.
Right.
You know, we always think about the FCC, the Department of Justice is going to be looking at this too. But I do think they can probably get it cleared through that agency as well.
All we really care about is President Trump. Has he voiced any opinion one way or the other about this type of deal or these types of deals?
You know, I haven't heard anything from him. You know, it would be reported in the news. I haven't heard him say anything about these deals. We are beginning to see a trend, though, in the merger world, Paul, where if the companies do and say the right things for the Trump administration, they're getting assistance in getting their deal through. And they're all pretty well aware of that. So as long as they do and say the right things, hey, we won't block political ads, we'll be neutral in, you know, our censorship of content, things like that that resonate with Trump, that's going to help them.
Sinclair did come in here with an 11th hour deal, did they not?
Yeah, I think so, but you know,
but they rebuffed. Why? It seemed like on a per share basis, it was better than the Nexstar deal for Tegna. So why rebuff it?
I can't speak to that. That's much more Tegna and Tegna's strategy. Maybe they think from an antitrust perspective, there's less overlap here. I mean, it is 35 of 51 of their DMAs. That's what Tegna says. But in those 35, depending on what stations they own, that overlap may not be problematic. It may only be problematic in a few. They may still have to divest some stations in order to get Department of Justice approval. I haven't done that comparison analysis.
자, 여기서 끊어가도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 사인들입니다. 수익 청산입니다.
How is the
자,
Department
수익
of
청산
Justice
후에 재진입 사인되도록
looking at mergers
하겠습니다.
and
자, 수익 청산
acquisitions
사인들입니다.
generally materially changed under the Trump administration versus the Biden administration?
It's so interesting. The rhetoric at the beginning was that it wouldn't change, that there would be this read-through and that there was more commonality with the Biden administrators than differences. But it has changed. They have
주문
gone back to
청산이
settling
완료되었습니다.
problematic deals with, structural, even one behavioral remedy, that was Omnicom Interpublic, with divestitures. This is something that wasn't happening during the Biden administration. They
자,
just
12차
said
진입
the
비율
deal's
대기하도록
problematic, we're
하겠습니다.
going to.
자, 12차 진입
This
비율
DOJ and this
대기입니다.
FTC has said, no, we're going to work it out. If we have problems, we'll work out the problems with a fix. We'll have a settlement, and we'll allow the broader deal to close, and that's a big difference.
What does this deal tell you, though, just about the larger
자,
landscape
바로
of
진입 사인되도록
television,
하겠습니다. 자, 매수
especially local
진입하겠습니다.
TV, which we
자,
know
매수 진입
is
5개야.
share.
확인 바랍니다.
그러니까
They're struggling just because
546.75입니다.
there are too many places the eyeballs can go, right? And
That's right.
they're competing with streaming and with the big guys. So is this really a merger of necessity for
자,
these
매수
local TV
5개야.
stations?
I would think it is. And I think we're going to
546.75입니다.
see more. That kind of consolidation has slowly. There's been quite a bit of consolidation actually
There
for
has.
over the years. It kind of slowed down during the Biden administration, but I think it's going to pick back up again because they are so challenged by cord
자,
cutters.
현재 진입권
by
대응료
people who
나가도록
never-
하겠습니다.
younger people who never watch TV at all.
Cable, what's that?
What is cable exactly?
So, looking broader here, I mean, over the next year or two, do you expect to see more deal activity just because companies and boards and private and all the forces out in the marketplace feel like this is the time to do it? This is an administration that will support
Yes.
deals?
I think so, and I think it would have already picked up if we didn't have so much tariff uncertainty. I think that has slowed things down, but as those things sort of work themselves out, I think we're going to see a lot more deal activity because you can see a path to getting these deals done without having to go to court and without dragging it out for 2 years.
So this is sort of a litmus test then, isn't it? This Nexstar Tegna deal.
I think it
for the
is.
rest of the industry, really.
Yeah, I think we have a few litmus tests out there. The Google Wiz deal that's pending is a litmus test for sure to see what this administration will do with the big tech platform merger. I think this Nexstar Tegna deal is a litmus test because they're breaking all these old rules that were the orthodoxy for years. We're going to see where that goes. And then, you have Dick's Foot Locker and you've got Charter Cox. And there are a lot of big deals pending right now. And I think they all are deals that would have had trouble during the Biden administration, but I think can get cleared now.
Here's a deal that Charlie Pellet actually mentioned to me just recently. What was it? The Spirit Airlines and was it JetBlue? Or somebody? I mean, some of those deals that did not get approved in the Biden administration. Do they bring them back, thinking that maybe they can get a more favorable ruling this time? Is there expectation we might see some of that?
I think it's possible. That was blocked by a judge. So the
Right.
department did win a lawsuit in that case to basically block that deal. It's possible that they try again because you have a very different Department of Transportation, which would have to approve that. You have a very different Department of Justice.
자, 여기서
Again,
수익 청산 사인되도록 하겠습니다.
have an
수익 청산 후에
opportunity to
재진입
divest
사인드리겠습니다.
and get a deal cleared.
자, 수익
And maybe
청산합니다.
at this point,
현재
it's a
진입권.
structurally different deal
수익 청산
because they could
사인드립니다.
divest certain routes or something like that.
How about Norfolk Southern? That deal.
주문 청산이
You're going to
완료되었습니다.
have to talk to Lee Glasgow on that one because that's not antitrust. Believe
That's
it or
not
not,
antitrust. Oh,
it's
that's
a
right.
Surface
13차
Transportation
진입뷰
Board, and
대기하도록
I have
하겠습니다.
very little
13차
knowledge of the
진입뷰
STB. The DOJ can
대기하도록
they can talk
하겠습니다.
to they can communicate, they can provide their views. They have no
But
clout
they
there.
don't have
No, there's
Oh.
nothing they can do.
Surface Transportation
Right.
Board. I should have known
Right.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll see what happens.
It's all right.
There. Well, I'm just looking at the news. Mr. Lutnick backs the Union Pacific Norfolk Southern Rail merger. So there you go. So we
Mr.
got
Trump
some-
likes it.
Let's get some deals done.
Yeah.
All right, Jennifer Rhee, thanks so much for joining us. Jen Rhee, she's a senior litigation analyst looking at all that antitrust stuff. When someone company A buys company B, the first person we go to is Jen Rhee to figure out, hey, are the regulators going to approve this deal? It's either the DOJ or the Federal Trade Commission or somebody else. The FCC in this case of the TV business.
자, 이어서 바로 매도 진입 사인되도록 하겠습니다.
체결되었습니다.
자, 매도 진입 사인드립니다. 진입가
red and green again, the S&P is
567.50입니다.
off just 10 points. That's not much to talk about. The Dow's off a couple hundred
자,
points. That's almost
매도진이
0.5%. But the
사인드립니다.
Nasdaq's higher. Sure it is. It's up about 1/10 of 1%. Looking at the VIX for Tom from the Upper East Side, it's a little bit higher here today, 14.5. And I'll give Tom also a Bitcoin quote, 112,000. How about the volatility? We're just at 125. This is
자, 여기서 수익 청산 사인되도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산하도록 하겠습니다. 현재 건 수익 청산하도록 하겠습니다.
You're listening to Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney
주문
on
청산이
Bloomberg
완료되었습니다.
Radio.
All right, Alexis Christoforous, Paul Sweeney, live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. Head over to YouTube.
자, 14차 진입뷰 대기하도록 하겠습니다. 14차 진입뷰 대기하도록
Merger
하겠습니다.
Monday, another M&A trade. I like to see it. This time, Keurig Dr. Pepper agreed to buy JDE Peet's for 15.7
바로 진입 사인되도록 하겠습니다. 자, 매도 다시 한번 매도 진입 사인됩니다. 진입가
확인 바랍니다.
59.25입니다. 다시 한번 매도 진입 사인드립니다.
Companies once the deal is completed. All I hear is the cash register ringing for the bankers and lawyers. Let's see what's going on here. Ken Shea joins us, senior consumer analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, safely ensconced down there in our Princeton campus. Ken, talk to us about Keurig Dr. Pepper. What are they trying to do here?
Yeah, hi, Paul. So this two-step deal basically addresses a lagging division they've had, the Keurig coffee business. You know, it's cold beverage business, namely Dr. Pepper, Mott's, Canada Dry, is doing really well. Whereas the Keurig coffee business really has been a laggard over the last couple of years. Now that you have higher green coffee costs, you have 50% tariffs coming in from Brazil, namely coffee beans, slow demand for at-home, pod business, the ubiquitous K-cups. And it really has painted a dismal picture for that division in the second half. So rather than try to sell it, and I don't know if they try to do that, but rather than try to do that at a low multiple, what they're trying to do cleverly is team it up with JDE Peet's, which is the #2 coffee producer in the world, behind only Nestle, but mostly big in Europe. And attach the essentially U.S. business, the K-cup business together, and you have a pretty good entity.
You know what struck me when I was reading about this deal, guys? Dr. Pepper was the second most popular soda in the U.S. last year.
Is that right?
Behind Coke and ahead of Pepsi.
I did not know that.
I can't remember the last time I drank a Dr. Pepper.
Well, if you're in Texas, that's like the state drink down there.
Is it now?
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
So, but Ken, the question here is, talk to me about the beverage side, the soda side here, because I know bottled water has sort of been eating their lunch, the overall industry, right, for years now, outpacing the sales of soda. So what's the health of that side of the business?
Oh, it's doing very well, Alexis. The cold beverage side is doing really well, whether it's Coke or Pepsi or Keurig Dr. Pepper, particularly those three companies, because distribution is everything. These three companies have national footprints, so they can reach all the outlets, whether it's fountain drinks or traditional supermarkets, vending, whatever. They can reach it, and they all have powerful brands. As you said, Dr. Pepper has really been coming on strong over the last couple of years, and they have other powerful brands. And unfortunately, their somewhat mini conglomerate business structure is being dragged down by Keurig, the coffee business. So that business is doing really well. Keurig has shown that it's also flexible and willing to pivot to fast-growing niche cold beverages. It's a business that continually changes with consumer tastes. Over the last year or so, for instance, energy drinks have taken off. So what they do? They went out and bought Ghost Energy, for even a younger demographic that typically drinks energy beverages. They are bigger into the sports drink category. They talked about on the last call a few weeks ago to get stronger in the protein space. Everybody wants protein. The GLP-1 folks need protein replenishment. So they've shown a willingness to branch out and tap into anywhere where fast-growing cold beverages are, doing well.
So I look on my global commodity screen and I see the price of coffee. It's up like 25% this year. I mean, what's going on with that? Talk to us about coffee and just the cost of the beans and all that kind of stuff.
Well, coffee beans are essentially sourced from Brazil. So to some degree, the roasters are hostage to good crops. And over the last year or so, you really haven't had great crops. I think some of the sellers in Brazil are also holding back, knowing that tariffs are coming and they're not going to get what they would like to get, and that's exacerbating the run-up that you've seen over the past 6 months, a year in coffee beans. If you went back over the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, you would see that the retail price of coffee, whether it's ready to drink or hot coffee at your local coffee shop, have increased faster than most other beverages, soft drinks I'm talking about. So you're even seeing some consumers bypass or switching from, say, like cold coffee to move to energy drinks. It's more cost effective. So the coffee producers have a conundrum. Do they continue to raise prices and get flat or lower volumes, or do they eat that margin? And so what Keurig has decided to do is kind of divest it in a tax-efficient way.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty solid deal here. I think the strategy you laid out, Ken, for these folks to kind of maybe get a little bit bigger scale-wise in a challenging coffee business and let the shareholders figure out what the value is. Ken Shea, Senior Consumer Products Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence down there in Princeton, New Jersey. Again, Keurig Dr. Pepper has agreed to buy JDE Peet's for $15.7 billion, or 15.7 billion euros to bolster its struggling coffee business, and then the company will then spin it out. How about that? That's just very interesting there. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, for our listeners in the U.S., a reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio on Sirius XM Channel 121. Access the world's only global audio business network, coast to coast, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg Radio on Sirius XM Channel 121 is presented by Oracle. Stay tuned for the latest market news and industry research. Again, mixed on the screen. We got some red, we got some green in the stock market. The bond market yields are higher by about 3 basis points across the curve. 10-year treasuries 4.28% here. Bitcoin a little bit lower. We're going to have more coming up. Bloomberg Intelligence starts right now.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. corporate high yield. These are two big-time blue-chip companies. One person's chaos is another person's animal spirits.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Our view is that the economy is slowing down.
There is the possibility of a death spiral.
Both quantum computing and AI are going to power the future.
People are just buying everything with tech.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
All right, Alexis Christoforous, Paul Sweeney live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. Coming up in this hour, we're going to check
현재 진입권 좀 더 길게 보고 대응해 나가도록 하겠습니다. 길게 보고 대응해 나가도록 하겠습니다. 현재 매도 진입권 실시간 대응 중에 있습니다.
Michael Sasso, Bloomberg economics reporter on new home sales. Came in a little bit better than expected, I guess. RJ Gallo, senior portfolio manager. He's over there at Federated Hermes in Pittsburgh. He's one of those smart guys that does the bonds. We're going to talk about fixed income with him. And then Poonam Goyal, senior retail analyst. She's going to join us about the Pinot family. They're exploring options for the sports brand Puma. I remember the first Pumas I bought back in the day. I'm going to call it 1979 maybe. So we got a lot to catch up on there. Right now, let's go to Charlie Pell and kick off this hour.
Hi, thank you very much. Here's what's going on. You mentioned Puma. The ADRs right now are surging by 16.4%. A whole lot more coming up right here on Bloomberg Intelligence. We have got the Dow, the S&P there in the red. NASDAQ, though, ripping higher, pushing higher by 37 points right now. It is up another 0.2%. Keeping it all in context, though, we have got the S&P 500 index down 9. That is a drop of 0.1%. Dow Industrials down 224 on the Dow, a decline there of just about 0.5%. Our Mag 7 index up 0.5%. Dow Transport's down 1% with the 10-year currently yielding 4.28%, the 2-year 3.73%. Gold up $3 the ounce, under 0.1%, 33.74 on the precious metal. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.6%, 64.67 a barrel. And Bitcoin now down by 0.4%, 112,339 on Bitcoin. So we are looking at a mixed market with the Dow, the S&P there lower. We've got NASDAQ advancing. As for the overall backdrop, Megan Horniman is Chief Investment Officer at Verdance Capital Advisors. She was interviewed this morning on surveillance.
From the large cap perspective, we'd be cautious all around. Obviously, the more the technology, the growthier the communication services, these are the areas of the market we would avoid at this time. They're good long-term investments, but in the short term, we think from a valuation perspective, they're due for a bit of a correction here.
Megan Horniman of Verdance interviewed this morning on surveillance. Stock we were just talking about with our Ken Shea, Keurig Dr. Pepper, has agreed to buy JDE Peet's of the Netherlands for $18.4 billion. Keurig Dr. Pepper down almost 8% right now. ADRs of Peet's, they are advancing by 16.2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Great. Thanks a lot, Charlie Pellet. Want to take a look now at some stocks on the move today, and there are plenty of them. I'm Alexis Christoforous along with Paul Sweeney, and we are joined by Tatiana Dari. So you're going to kick things off with Crescent Energy. What have you got?
Exactly. Besides Keurig Dr. Pepper, another M&A deal in the news today is Crescent Energy, your ticker CRGY, down about 6% here after agreeing to buy Vital Energy in an all-stock transaction valued at about $3.1 billion, inclusive of Vital's net debt, which as of the last quarter was about $2.4 billion, plus its market cap as of Friday of $600 million there. That's how you get to the valuation. Well, analysts saying that the devil is in the pricing details, noting the company's valuation is not very attractive, and its exposure in the Permian, the country's biggest oil field, has largely run its course due to balance sheet constraints. But, this deal just demonstrates how this U.S. companies or U.S. shell operators are pursuing scale at a really tough time for the industry, where output is flat or declining, and energy prices, guys, have been, WTI is down about 10% this year.
Yeah.
Crescent was advised by Evercore and Jefferies, and Vital Energy was advised by J.P. Morgan. I always call out the bankers.
Who are making the money.
I wonder who's getting paid there. Wayfair.
Wayfair down about 7%, and its peers, RH, Williams-Sonoma, down a similar amount, taking a hit after President Trump announced a major tariff investigation on furniture coming to the U.S. within the next 50 days. And for context, the U.S. here is by far the largest furniture importer in the world, and this would affect about $15 billion worth of imports. So this is casting a shadow on this sector until we get the news. 50 days is a long time, and we don't have a rate. So obviously the jitters there are very high. However, analysts say there could be a buying opportunity later on when the news is out, because as we know with tariffs, the scare is big at the beginning, and then the end result, it's much less as at the beginning. But it's yet another story that brings tariffs back, right? Just when you thought they're going away, they're back.
These are sector tariffs, I think.
And you said Netflix. I don't know what's going on. Don't tell me they're raising prices again.
Well,
자, 바로 신입 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 바로 매수 진입 사인 드립니다. 자, 매수 5개야.
Up about 2%. They're the top gainer in this.
체결되었습니다.
The company is about to launch its
바랍니다.
first ever
58430입니다.
Netflix houses in Philadelphia, in
자,
October,
매수
and
진입권
Dallas in
대응이 나가도록
November.
하겠습니다. 자,
This is a permanent
58430. 자, 매수
year-round home for
진입입니다.
fans that is free to enter and browse around with interactive experiences. The best part, it's free to enter, but they get you with the experiences. Well, you do have to pay.
자,
And
매수
this
진입
just
대응이
shows,
나가도록
how the company
하겠습니다.
is seeking to expand beyond just streaming your favorite shows, and it aligns with its long-term strategy of creating a new level of engagement with
It's all about the experience, guys. Get the experience. Tatiana Dari, thank you so much. All right, and for more conversations like this, just subscribe to our new Stock Movers reports. You can listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen. All right, we're going to switch gears here and talk international politics for a minute. South Korea's president is going to meet with Donald Trump at the White House, facing his biggest test since taking office. We're going to talk a little bit more about that agenda right now with Tyler Kendall, Bloomberg Television Washington correspondent. So, Tyler, this meeting is going to be happening very soon. What do you think are going to be some of the flashpoints here?
Yeah, hey, Alexis. Well, it's already not off to the greatest start, because we had President Trump posting on Truth Social earlier this morning, alluding to previous political instability in South Korea, saying that could make it difficult for the U.S. to do business with the country, though we should say it's not totally clear what President Trump was alluding to, though we know that South Korea had seen perhaps this constitutional crisis back in December, when the predecessor to the current South Korean president invoked martial law. But now it's interesting to hear the president pick up on this idea of doing business, because we know foreshadowing this meeting is going to be the ongoing trade negotiations with the country. That's really going to be top of the agenda here. We heard from the NEC director, Kevin Hassett, earlier today as such, saying that they are going to work to finalize the details of the trade framework that was reached with South Korea during this visit, because while South Korea was able to secure what is considered to be a preferential tariff rate of 15%, there are still a lot of big questions here, including perhaps most importantly how the $350 billion pledged investment fund is ultimately going to work. There are questions here about how much revenue the U.S. would get from that investment fund, how that investment fund is going to be structured. We've heard from South Korean officials some differing details here compared to what we hear from U.S. officials, including that this fund is really going to be structured more as loan guarantees, and that the U.S. stake in this is going to be much smaller than previously thought. So those are some of the big questions here that we are going to be watching for, because we still need to see those, for example, sector-specific tariffs come down, including, importantly, for South Korea autos. The South Koreans were able to clinch that lower rate, but we haven't seen those sector-specific tariffs come down, and that could be pinged to some other priorities like like we saw for the European Union, for example, and that South Korea might need to take some further action in order to see all of the levies agreed to come lower than they currently are.
Tyler, how many other countries are we expecting to make their trip to the White House and make the announcement and say how much money they're going to invest and all that kind of stuff? It seems like we have a couple every week.
Yeah, I mean, this White House has definitely looked to show progress when it comes to these trade deals, and we are still waiting to glean some important details from other large trading partners. Take, for example, Japan, which it's our understanding that deal mirrors very closely to what we're seeing with South Korea. But there are still big sticking points across the board. I would highlight again when it comes to South Korea, for example, market access for U.S. agriculture has been a really big political flashpoint in South Korea, and we've heard President Trump, for example, say that they're going to completely open their markets, and the South Korean president say, just hold on there for a second. There seems to be discrepancies like that that officials need to work out, and I'd point you, for example, look at India. This is another country that we've really seen the trade talks stall over, and we know U.S. agriculture, again, appears to be a sticking point there, and over the weekend, President Trump announced his nominee to be the next U.S. ambassador to India, a post that has been vacant since the Trump administration began. So perhaps we will start to see more officials from that country come over here and try to move those trade negotiations along. There have been a lot of visits. You're definitely right. Just look at last week, Paul, half a dozen European leaders here to talk about the war in Ukraine. So no doubt it's been busy here at the White House.
Absolutely. Red headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Musk sues Apple, OpenAI over alleged AI, quote, arrangement on the iPhone. So we'll have more reporting on that coming up.
Before we let you go, Tyler, I want to talk a little bit more about the schedule of South Korea's president while he's here in the U.S. I understand he's going to be going to Philly, going to visit a shipyard there. What do you know about that?
Right, exactly. This is actually one of the points of agreement that we've seen between the administration and the South Korean government. We know that about $150 billion of the pledged investment fund that, as I mentioned, we're still waiting for some more details, but this might be one firm detail that we can really latch on here, will go towards shipbuilding. And this has been a critical area of agreement between the two countries as the U.S. has sought to build up its shipbuilding in order to compete with China, which really dominates the market at this point. We know that the South Korean president, after he leaves Washington, will be heading up to a shipyard in Philadelphia to tout that investment commitment there.
All right, Tyler, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Tyler Kendall, she's Bloomberg Television Washington correspondent. She's joining us down there from Washington, D.C. And again, looking at the Bloomberg reporting here, President Donald Trump blasted South Korea for political instability, foreshadowing a potentially rocky visit by the country's president to the White House to discuss its framework for trade and investment agreement with the U.S. So hopefully they can get something worked out today. It seems to be, we'll do business with you, we'll invest in your country, Mr. President, in exchange for lower than feared tariffs.
Seems to be the trend, and billions of dollars worth of investment.
Yep.
Still don't quite understand what those things will look like.
Right.
But that's what they're talking about.
Yep. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, new home sales came out today. I don't know. I mean, I still got mortgage rates like 6.5%, 6.6%. I don't know how that deals with the home market, but it came in at 652,000 new home sales. The consensus was 630. The revised from last month was 656, so actually down a little bit from the revised number. But let's see what's happening in the housing market. Michael Sasso, Bloomberg economics reporter, joins us. Michael, how's the housing market out there?
Oh, I'd say the housing market's somewhat, a little bit in a slump, I'd call it. The sales actually exceeded expectations, but expectations were really pretty low. Overall, I'd say what's happening is builders have really come to rely, maybe in a bad way, on incentives. So these are like mortgage buy-downs where they have to kind of pay to lower people's mortgage rates, and also cutting prices. And so that's not really where they'd like to be. I mean, sales have not fallen off a cliff, but it's very much of a reliant on incentives and price cuts at the moment.
But Michael, we had years and years of bidding wars, people coming in and buying with cash these homes. Do you think that buyers are gaining a bit more leverage over sellers right now?
Yeah, particularly in some markets in the South and the West where they've had, build up in inventory, new home inventories slipped just a tiny bit last month, but they're still at almost near, like 15, 17-year highs. And so with this higher inventory, it kind of leaves builders having to, cut. They don't like to cut prices because, but they're really being forced to lately. And so I'm not sure anyone's calling it a buyer's market, but it's getting very close to a buyer's market for sure.
I'm looking at the Mortgage Bankers Association.
자, 그래서 수익 청산하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 사인드립니다. 수익 청산하도록 하겠습니다. 현대증권 수익 청산 사인드립니다.
Is there a sense where with the Fed
주문 청산이 완료되었습니다.
Is there a sense that there's a mortgage rate out there that'll
자, 16차 진입뷰 대기하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 16차 진입뷰 대기하도록 하겠습니다.
Well, in the existing home market, the chief economist of the National Association of Realtors has kind of used 6% as a threshold. So below 6%,
자, 매도 이어서 바로 매도 진입 사인드리도록 하겠습니다.
The question is, are people getting used to these higher levels? I mean, there's a growing
자, 진입가
확인 바랍니다.
588.50입니다. 588.50.
And so people are ever so
매도
slightly
5개야
getting used to
진입
it.
사인
I guess the
드렸습니다.
question is, at what point do they get used to, and what is that threshold?
지켜보고 대응해 나가도록 하겠습니다.
Michael, I want to talk about this mini comeback. I'm going to call it mini because it's nothing to get too excited about. But who's driving it? Because I'm reading on the Bloomberg terminal that investors are driving a lot of it. They're buying vacation homes. They're flipping homes. They're renting them. Where does that leave the first-time home buyer? Because what I'm hoping you'd say is, Alexis, first-time home buyers are driving this rebound, but not so, right?
I don't recall. Last I remember, it's still a pretty rocky landscape for first-time home buyers. It's true that prices are coming down slightly. Builders are making homes with smaller footprints, which helps first-time buyers. But as I recall, it's still at a fairly, I think it is around 30% of sales or whatnot. But overall, I think it's still a tricky time, and there is an expectation that it is going to be kind of move up buyers, and that first-time home buyers are going to have a difficult time until mortgage rates come down, and then perhaps prices. I've seen some estimates that maybe a 5% price drop is in the offing, which is not a huge price drop, but will be certainly welcome, especially by first-time buyers.
All right, Michael, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Michael Sasso, economics reporter, Bloomberg News. I don't know, my town, the Jersey Shore, these things are selling before the sign even gets in the ground, with one exception. If you've mispriced it, it's just going to sit. I mean, so that part of the market, people just buying anything at any price, that's done. But if you put something reasonably priced, it goes in a nanosecond.
And it's hard, I think, for the seller to wrap their head around that and to make peace with it, even the home builders, because they'll look at the comps and say, but wait a minute, they got 1.1. Why can't I get 1 point? Well, because the market is always in flux, and that's not happening right now, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we've heard reporting, and we've talked to Drew Redding, who covers the housing market for Bloomberg Intelligence. He says the markets that were really hot post-pandemic, think Florida, think Texas, a lot of those markets are pulling back in double digits on prices, but they're already, arguably they were at inflated prices anyway, so maybe coming back to a more normalized level. We're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
자, 현재 진입가 여기서 수익 청산 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 짧게 보도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 사인 드립니다. 자, 현재 진입건 수익 청산하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 사인 드렸습니다. 자, 1각 기준 약 60만원에서 수익 청산 사인 드렸습니다.
주문 청산이 완료되었습니다.
자, 17차 진입뷰 대기하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 17차 진입뷰 대기하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 여기 단기 추세 전환 가능성이 있다고 판단되어서 다시 한번 매도 진입 사인드리도록 하겠습니다. 단기 추세 전환 가능성이 있다고 판단되어서 다시 한번 매도 진입 사인드리도록 하겠습니다.
확인
자,
바랍니다.
진입가 586.00입니다. 진입가 586.00. 자, 매도 5개 약입니다. 자, 586.00에서 매도 5개 약입니다. 실시간 내용 그냥 나가도록 하겠습니다.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg, and this Bloomberg Business Flash is brought to you by Oracle. Attention, growing businesses. Oracle's offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. For new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitments, see if your company qualifies at oracle.com/Bloomberg. We begin with a developing story. Elon Musk is accusing Apple and OpenAI in a lawsuit of unfairly favoring the AI app across iPhones and thwarting competition for other chatbot makers. Apple shares, they're higher right now, up by 0.5%. It is a mixed market with the Dow, the S&P. They are both trading lower right now. We have got the S&P little changed. It is down 2 points, down less than 0.1%. The Dow remains lower as well, down 171 after Friday's surge. Right now, the Dow down 0.4%, but NASDAQ advancing another 60 points, up another 0.3%. Year to date, NASDAQ is up by 11.6%. Our Mag 7 index pushing higher by 0.7%. The 10-year 4.27%, with the 2-year 3.72%. Gold little changed, up 0.1%, $35.75 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up now by 1.6%, $64.69 a barrel on WTI. And speaking of the oil patch, Texas-based Crescent Energy has agreed to buy rival shale oil producer Vital Energy for about $733 million. Shares of Crescent Energy, they're down 6.2%. Vital is surging by 13.1%. Recapping, little change on the S&P, down now by 3 points. And for on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks for keeping us informed, Mr. Charlie Pellet. I want to stick with the markets for a moment because we know last week the stock market and also the bond market reacted pretty warmly to news that the Fed will most likely be cutting interest rates possibly as soon as their September meeting, which is just a couple weeks from now. But where do we go from here, and what is the bond market telling us? Here to read the tea leaves, RJ Gallo, Senior Portfolio Manager, Fixed Income at Federated Hermes on the markets. He joins us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with all the beautiful bridges in Pittsburgh. RJ, good to have you on the show. Tell me what the bond market is telegraphing right now. What are they expecting from the Federal Reserve in the way of interest rate cuts?
Well, the market came into the Jackson Hole speech a little bit on edge, to be frank. I think there was an expectation that Powell might try to push back or knock down building expectations for a Fed ease at the September FOMC meeting. As it turned out, he did the opposite. He opened the door to an easing, focusing a lot on what he called a curious balance between the labor and demand and supply and the slower job creation that we've seen. All in all, he views that as downside risk to the labor market and opened the door to easing. The markets loved it. Pretty good rally in all kinds of assets, risk assets, the bond market, riskier corners of the bond market on Friday. You know, at this point, looking at the always handy Bloomberg work, you know, you've gotten about an 85% chance of a 25 basis point cut at this September meeting. I think the probability is actually a little higher than that. I think we would have to see a very, very bad inflation and a very strong jobs print in the additional set of data that we get before the next meeting.
RJ, what's the expectation for you guys as to how the Fed will proceed after September? Is this a kind of we're going to go every other month, we're going to put out a 25-point cut, then wait and see what the data says, or we're just going to go all in and kind of maybe front load it?
First of all, we've been telling our clients for a long time now that we believe that the level of Treasury yields is not going to return to pre-pandemic norms. We're not going to see, you know, 2s and 3 handles across the whole Treasury curve for extended periods of time like we did. We were living at the time in a very low inflation environment. In fact, the Fed had a framework that was geared towards trying to build inflation back before the pandemic. It's almost shocking to remember that, because since the pandemic, especially with the surge in inflation related to the reopening and the recovery from the pandemic, as well as a lot of fiscal and monetary stimulus to boot, we had a big inflation problem. The Fed abandoned this idea of trying to build inflation because there was just too darn much of it. Remember, the CPI was over 9% at one point. And so the Fed is now, in a sense, unwound the dovishness that preceded the pandemic. And I think they're trying to play things from a more balanced perspective now. I think they fear there's less risk of us having a deep downturn that would require them to lower rates back to zero. I think the bond market feels the same way. If you look at longer term forwards off of the bond market, you have yields that are generally comparable to where they are now, not unlike the levels that we saw before the great financial crisis. So we don't think the Fed is unleashing many easings here. This probably troughs out somewhere in the 3s for the Fed funds target. They have a dot of 3% at the end of this calendar year, long run dot at 3%, and at the end of this calendar year, it's even higher than that. I think there's a decent chance we don't even get to 3%. So we're not positioning for a big series of Fed eases and as a result, a large change in market yields. We think yields can still go a little bit lower from here, but it won't be a repeated series of eases and a big rally necessarily.
All right. So having said all that, RJ, where is the brightest opportunity, we'll call it, for investors right now? I mean, is it munis? Is it corporate bonds? Where do you see it?
Well, if you look on a year-to-date basis, the Bloomberg aggregate index is up
충분히 추세 전환 가능성이 있다고 판단되어서 조금 더 지켜보고 대응해 나가도록 하겠습니다. 현재 매도 5개야 실시간 대응 중에 있습니다.
Even since then, the situation now, in my opinion, the best value, you don't want to necessarily chase what has already performed all the time. You know, that happens a lot in the stock market. I'll leave it to others to decide whether that's the case now. But in the bond market, you sort of have to look for what's a little bit beaten up or what hasn't participated in the rally. And we actually think the answer to that then is to look for longer term munis. The long end of the muni market, the 20-year portion and longer of the muni market, this is from the Bloomberg index, is actually down 3.9% this year. And the overall muni index is about flat. Munis got beaten up because of a massive surge, a record amount of muni issuance, as well as some questions around tax policy that came with the One Big Beautiful Bill. The One Big Beautiful Bill left the tax exemption on muni interest intact. The supply is still heavy, so investors have an opportunity to buy an asset class that has gotten a little beaten up. It's not keeping up with other portions of the bond market. So we think munis are probably the most attractive place to play, especially for higher income people. At this point, the implied tax rate is in the low single digits for a long-term muni bond. We know that higher income people pay a lot more than the low single digits.
RJ, thanks so much for joining us. Always appreciate getting a few minutes of your time. Senior RJ Gallows is Senior Portfolio Manager in the Fixed Income Business at Federated. Hermes, when I went to visit the Federated people out there, which I did twice a year for about 20 years, always avoided the fixed income floor, went right to the equity floor. That's they're more my kind of people. These the fixed income people are too much math and all that kind of convexity and all that silly stuff. I had no interest in that. Deals. The Pinot family is said to explore options for selling, perhaps, its sports brand Puma. And I looked at the Puma shares. They trade in Germany. They've lost like half their value. I don't know what's going on over there, but Poonam Goyal does. She's the senior U.S. retail analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Poonam, talk to us about Puma. What's going on with that brand, and why the Pinot family, and maybe looking to sell here?
Yeah, so I think Puma's come under a lot of pressure in the last 2 years, especially since they lost their CEO to Adidas just about 2 years ago. What's happened is that Puma was able to thrive when Nike had pulled out of wholesale as they regained a lot of that shelf space. But now with Nike pushing back and really entering wholesale in a more meaningful way, Puma doesn't have that same visibility in wholesale. So their wholesale sales have struggled, and they really haven't found a niche for themselves to grow the company from where it is today. So lots of pain points. I think, with a sale, if there is a sale, that is, it might just give it a bigger lap to fall into, giving it more scale to leverage and maybe allow it to grow a little stronger.
I'm curious about endorsements because I just don't feel like I see it with Puma in the way that I do with a Nike, certainly, or Adidas. I mean, I think I saw Dua Lipa out there hawking, I don't know the connection there, but hawking Pumas. So are they behind the curve when it comes to what can be really vital endorsements?
The vital endorsements are critical in the game of sports. And you're absolutely right when it comes to mainstream sports that we're used to, like basketball and soccer and football. Puma doesn't have as big of a play there as Nike and Adidas. But Puma has crafted itself into the smaller sports, like cricket, for example. It endorses one of the largest cricket players in India for cricket. It has the Ferrari sponsorship for racing cars, right? So it does participate more meaningfully in the smaller sports, you might want to call it, versus basketball. It has LaMelo, but it doesn't have really that much more in terms of in the other mainstream sports like football or others.
Who do you think should, if this company is put up for sale, who do you think should buy Puma?
That's a tough question. I mean, it's probably going to be, right now it's speculated as Anta Sports and Li-Ning. And I think those are all possibilities because they have the room to take in a brand that wouldn't have as much overlap, right? It's the predominant brand. It could help them scale their own visibility. I don't think a Puma makes sense for a Nike or an Adidas, for example. I don't think that's where it belongs, but I think anywhere else is fair game.
If they don't sell, what are the other options on the table here?
I think it's just going back to the basics, right? I think it's going to be harder for them to compete with Nike and Adidas because they don't have the dollars or the deep pockets to advertise and market as aggressively as the other two do, but they have to stay true to their niche markets and really craft their way up from there. It's going to be tough. Look, the athleisure market is getting more competitive. Everyone is trying to sell athleisure, right? Whether it's the specialty apparel retailers or the mainstream retailers, whoever it is, they're all going after that market share because the market is growing. It's not going to be an easy ride, and they have a new CEO in place to help them drive the turnaround. But we haven't heard a strategy yet, so we're not sure what their intentions are and what the roadmap is to really drive this turnaround, at least yet.
30 seconds, Poonam. Who's the Pinot family? Who are they?
They own about 29% of Puma shares, so I think they're an investor that's largely invested there. But I would say there's a push to get the sale going because of the underperformance that they've had.
Gotcha. All right, Poonam, thanks so much. Appreciate it as always. Poonam Goyal. She covers all the retailers for Bloomberg Intelligence. I have a soft spot in my heart for Pumas, but I haven't bought a Puma sneaker in 40 years.
Well,
maybe.
I beat you there because I never bought a Puma sneaker.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. Just wasn't that kind of gal.
I had the Puma Clydes for Walt Frazier.
Oh, that was cool.
Back in the day.
The orange and
yep. That would make your socks turn orange, that kind of stuff. So got that. My mother was happy about that when I was a kid. All right, looking at the markets here, still mixed. S&P pretty much unched on the day. The Dow is down 200 points, but the NASDAQ is up 60 points, so red and green there. The VIX for the overall market, pretty steady here, right around 14. So as Tom Keene would say, a quiescent level for the VIX. Yields just ticking up just a little bit here, but a couple of basis points, 4.28% on your 10-year WTI crude oil. That's up $1, still below $65 a barrel. No problems there. Gold, $3,300 an ounce, and BitDog, $112,400. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
자, 여기서 수익 청산하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 수익 청산 후에 재진입 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 현재 진입권 수익 청산하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 약수익권에서 수익 청산 사인 드립니다.
주문 청산이 완료되었습니다.
자, 수익 청산 사인 드렸습니다. 자, 18차 진입뷰 대기하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 18차 진입뷰 대기하도록 하겠습니다. 자, 좀 길게 지켜보고 진입 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 조금 지켜보고 진입 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 이어서 바로 진입 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 동일하게 매도 진입 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 매도 진입 사인 드리도록 하겠습니다.
체결되었습니다. 확인
자,
바랍니다.
매도 5계약 진입가 593.50입니다. 593.50. 자, 목표 수익금까지 천천히 대응이어 나가도록 하겠습니다. 자, 매도 진입 사인 드렸습니다.
This is breaking news from Bloomberg.
All right, it's Paul Sweeney. We're going to head down to Washington, D.C. President Trump is taking questions in the Oval Office.
Just one stand for that. Yes. Are you prepared to order National Guard troops, though, into American cities if those governors don't request the federal deployment?
I am, but I also think that, look, Chicago, everybody knows how bad it is. Everybody standing there knows. We know. You don't have to be doing any studies. They should be saying, please come in. Pritzker should be saying that. You know, I did a favor for Christy Whitmer. A good favor, I think, with the fish, the carp, the China carp. Did you ever hear of it? China carp. And it's taken over your Great Lakes. You know about that, right? And she came and she wanted to know if it's possible for us to do something about it. And I said, well, I'll do it. But I think it's appropriate that the person from Illinois, the governor from Illinois, asks also. It's a tremendously expensive project, actually. It's invasive. It's horrible what's happened. And we can do it with GSA and various people. But we can do it. We're going to just have to see what happens, okay? We're going to have to see what happens. But
you believe that you have the legal authority
but the governor of Michigan came, was very respectful, asked for it. She's done a good job. I did that. I opened the Air Force Base, you know, kept it open for F-35s and various planes, F-22s too. I did that for the state of Michigan at her request. And I will, and also at our congressmen. You know, we have congressmen that are unbelievably pro-Michigan up there. But some of this stuff, like the lakes, the Great Lakes, this is a big problem that nobody ever talks about. Most of you probably have never heard of. We have a pretty violent fish that comes from China, China carp, Chinese carp. And you see them jumping out. They jump into boats and they jump all over the place. They've got a lot of energy. And there's a way of getting rid of them. It's very expensive. And I didn't get a request from the governor of Illinois, is affected maybe more than anybody else, right? And I think until I get that request from that guy, I'm not going to do anything about it. And I feel the same way about crime. We go in, we will solve Chicago within 1 week, maybe less, but within 1 week, we will have no crime in Chicago, just like we have no crime in D.C. But, you know, I don't like to go in and do it and then have somebody stand up and say what a great job he's doing on crime. And we don't want the military in our state. We don't want the military. Do you understand? Do you understand that?
Yeah, these governors will say
so I don't know.
There is no emergency
We're going to have a little
response.
meeting, I think. You know, I feel like we go in and we do it, like here. To a lesser extent with the mayor, she hasn't been terrible, but she hasn't been, you know, exactly saying, oh, great. She did say last night, I heard her say that, well, we really don't want the military in D.C. Well, that's, you know, not very nice, I guess. That's a little bit of a hit. But she's not as bad as some. We saved Los Angeles, and all we did is get criticized by this idiot that's running the state into the ground, right, where people are leaving. He should be thanking us, and he should be requesting us to be there. And the governor of Illinois should be. Chicago's a disaster. And the governor of Illinois should say, President, would you do us the honor of cleaning up our city? We need help. They need help. They need help.
So without that request,
We may wait. We may or may not. We may just go in and do it, which is probably what we should do. The problem is, it's not nice when you go in and do it and somebody else is standing there saying, as we give great results, say, we don't want the military. They need help badly. Chicago desperately needs help. Just look at the crime statistics. Look at the statistics that JD said about, even I didn't know it was that bad. That's terrible. But all I know is we're being celebrated because we went an entire week. Now it's 11 days. We went an entire week without a murder. And I said, boy, that sounds terrible. I didn't know how to, I actually made a speech. I didn't know how to say it because it's a great number. It's a great thing. But it sounds so bad. I mean, supposing you're from a foreign country, which is properly run, and they don't have murders and things, right, so much, or in some cases virtually at all. And you have somebody saying, I'm proud to announce that nobody was murdered in the capital of the United States this week. It sounds terrible, but...
Mr. President, Gavin Newsom, you mentioned Gavin Newsom on crime.
Gavin Newsom, yes.
Is there a federal mechanism you're hoping to use to fight back against his redistricting constitutional amendment, or is that...
Well, I think I'm going to be filing a lawsuit pretty soon, and I think we're going to be very successful in it. We're going to be filing it through the Department of Justice. That's going to happen. And we're also going to be filing a lawsuit on blue slipping. You know, blue slips make it impossible for me as president to appoint a judge or a U.S. attorney because they have a gentleman's agreement. It's nothing memorialized. It's a gentleman's agreement that's about 100 years old, where if you have a president like a Republican and if you have a Democrat senator, that senator can stop you from appointing a judge or a U.S. attorney. In particular, those are the two, I guess anything, but those are the two that are very important. So we have numerous states where we have unbelievable people. Now, Jay Clayton was just approved in the Southern District, but he was so good. He was a top student, top schools, top everything, went to Sullivan and Cromwell, became the head of Sullivan and Cromwell, came down here, was Securities and Exchange Commission, ran it for 4 years during my term, like impeccably, beautiful job. He did an incredible job. And we went to court, and the judges, Democrat judges, voted that he could. That's the only way you get by it. But generally speaking, you can't do that because you'll have judges from the other party. So Jay Clayton just got approved, and he's in, but he didn't get approved by the senators. He got approved by the court system in New York, which was a great thing. And I had a big victory in New York, I might add. I saved myself $500 million with a fake, corrupt attorney general, a really corrupt person with a corrupt judge who was disgraceful, and they're being mauled right now by everybody. It's so corrupt, and it kept business out of New York, stuff like that. But the appellate division vacated all of that stuff that you read about, and we're going to do a big number on that whole thing. You can't have a corrupt court system. You can't have that. You have to have borders, and you have to have a free press. Otherwise, you don't have a country. But you'll be hearing about the blue slipping, because if you have not, you don't need two senators. You just need one Democrat senator with a Republican. The only person that I can get approved are Democrats or maybe weak Republicans, but we don't want that. But the only person I will be able to get approved in any of those states where you have a Democrat I can't get a U.S. attorney. I can only get a Democrat U.S. attorney. And this is based on an old custom. It's not based on law, and I think it's unconstitutional, and I'll probably be filing a suit on that pretty soon. Yeah, please.
During the campaign, you called Kamala Harris a communist, but the Biden-Harris administration, they never called for nationalizing a private company with the federal government like you're proposing with Intel. What do you say to some who say this is a bit hypocritical, and is this the new way of doing industrial policy? Yeah, sure it is. I want to try and get as much as I can. If people come in and they need something, as an example, as a real estate person, if I have an agreement and I have any form of a stopgap where I can stop somebody from doing something, right? I have a covenant in an agreement, and they come to me and they say, would like to do something, but you have us restricted. If I do that, they usually have to pay. Now, in the case of Intel, it was interesting, but I hope I'm going to have many more cases like it. Intel came in. I met with the gentleman. I had a lot of respect for him. He came in under a little bit of a cloud. I liked his story. I thought he was good. I think he really means to do a good job with Intel. I said, I'd like to ask whether or not you'd give
you know, because still, a lot of people said I invested in Intel. I didn't invest, but I invest my heart in it and my soul because I want the country to be strong. But I said, I'd like you to give 10% of Intel to the United States of America. Not to me, to the United States of America. And I said, if you have them as a partner, you have the United States as a partner, I think that would be a very good thing for Intel. And he thought about it, a little bit different, and he said, I like that idea very much. We have a deal. And I just made $10 billion or $11 billion for the United States of America. And yeah, there will be other cases. If I have that opportunity again, I would do that. And then, you know, you do have stupid people say, oh, that's a shame. It's not a shame. It's called business. If somebody's willing to give you 10% of a company and you're not paying for it, and I will tell you, with a company like Intel, as you know, it's had difficulty. I want them to do well. I want them to do well anyway, but I want them to do well in particular now.
But isn't public ownership of a private company a new way of doing business in the business of the United States? Isn't that what you were sort of rejecting?
So are tariffs. So as you know, the stock market went up almost 1,000 points on Friday. And it went up not because of this very, I think, terrible, hello? Who's that? Who is that back there? All right, get out of the room. It went up because of something much different. It went up because it was announced, CBO announced the numbers, and as you know, they gave no credit to tariffs. They said they made a mistake, that the trade deficit will be reduced because of Trump's tariffs, will be reduced by $4 trillion, right? Is that what they said, right? They said $4 trillion, and the market went up like a rocket ship because the tariffs are good. Well, tariffs aren't that usual. If the 7 wars I stopped, 4 of them were because of the fact that I had tariffs and trade. And I was able to say, well, if you do this, if you go fight, and if you want to kill everybody, that's okay, but I'm going to charge you each 100% tariff when you trade with us. You know what? They all gave up. I stopped 7 wars. Numerous of them was because of tariffs. So, you know, you never knew the word tariff. It didn't exist really, essentially, in this country until actually in the 1870s up till 1913 it existed, and we were the richest country. We were richer then, proportionately, than at any time in the history of our country. And then, stupidly, in 1913, they said, let's go to the income tax way of life. Let the people pay instead of foreign countries. No. We're taking in trillions of dollars in tariffs, and we're stopping wars because of tariffs. So that's not so normal either. But you know what? Other countries did it to us, and now we're doing it to other countries.
You rolled out boots on the ground in Ukraine, but how would air support as part of a security guarantee be any different? Those U.S.
Well, you
airmen...
really went from one question to the next. You go from one. I expected him at least challenge me a little bit. Now we're talking about boots on the ground.
But U.S. air assets over the skies of Ukraine as part of a security guarantee, wouldn't those U.S. airmen also be in danger?
You don't know what security guarantee is because we haven't even discussed the specifics of it, and we'll see. Number one, Europe is going to give them significant security guarantees, and they should because they're right there. But we'll be involved from the standpoint of backup. We're going to help them. And I think if we get a deal, and I think we will, but if we get a deal, you're not going to, I don't believe you're going to have much of a problem. But we'll back it up because I want to stop seeing people being killed. You know, when Biden was here, he gave $350 billion. You know this from covering business. $350 billion to Ukraine. I said that Zelensky's the greatest salesman I think I've ever met, better than P.T. Barnum, because he'd come to the country, he'd walk out with $50 billion every time. He actually came here once, he walked out with $100 billion. We're up to $350 billion. I got $1 trillion worth of rare earth that we have from the country because I felt badly for our taxpayer, but I did something else at the NATO meeting. They are wealthy countries, but they weren't paying, and we don't pay any money to Ukraine anymore. Do you know that? In fact, it's the opposite. They request through NATO, we deal with NATO. We don't deal really with Ukraine. NATO requests missiles. They want Patriots. They want missiles. We give the missiles to NATO. NATO pays us in full and does what they want. I mean, I think they give them mostly they can do other things with them too, because we're dealing with NATO. We pay no money to Ukraine. We gave $350 billion to Ukraine. You know, if we didn't give that kind of money, and I was the one that gave the javelins, if you remember. I gave the javelins, they were very effective. They say Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. They were very effective with those tanks right at the beginning. But you would have never had a war if I were president. You would have never had a war. Just to finish, we spend no money on Ukraine anymore. We were getting fleeced by a president that didn't know what he was doing. To be honest, I don't blame Ukraine. I mean, if they come and ask for $100 billion, then they get it. But we were in for $350 billion. Now, we make money. I don't want to make money on Ukraine. I want the war to end because I want to save all those lives. I want to just say, but just so you understand, we're no longer losing money on that thing. We were losing money hand over fist. And now we don't lose any money. Now we sell weapons to NATO. Because NATO agreed, because of me, to go to 5%. They had 2% and didn't pay. Now they have 5% and they're all paid up. So they have trillions of dollars and they give us that money. But I really want the war to end, and we're going to get it ended.
Mr. President, since the historic summit here with Ukrainian President Zelensky and European leaders all met here with you at the White House, you said you wanted to get this done bilateral as soon as possible. Have you spoken to Putin since last Monday?
Yeah, I have.
What is your conversation? Or can you share?
Every conversation I have with him is a good conversation, and then unfortunately a bomb is loaded up into Kiev or someplace, and then I get very angry about it. I think we're going to get the war done. It's tough. I thought that would be, of the 7 that I settled, I thought that would be the easiest of the group. See, you never know what's going to happen. You know, war, strange things happen in war. The fact that he went to Alaska, our country, I think was a big statement that he wants to get it done. That was not easy for him to go to Alaska, you know, for him to come here.